Wes, what's going on?
Hello.
So, I asked you here because I knew that you had done... Well, I knew you'd read the book, and you reminded me that you did the chapters for Marcus Verus. But what we're doing here, if you can't tell, is a little unpolished. It's unpolished because we were going to do this last week when I had all this extra bandwidth and stuff, but I had one of the most, cognitively taxing weeks of my life doing jury duty all week, which was fascinating, and I will talk about at length at another time.
All right, but let's be real. It's unpolished because Eneasz is the one who adds the polish, and he's not here.
We don't want to take all the credit from him and say that he adds none of it. But I like to think I can do a halfway decent job on my own.
Right,
or rather, the two of us. But
probably
the two of us can probably amount to about a fourth of an Eneasz or a third of an Eneasz. Maybe.
I mean, Eneasz adds no polish to the Mind Killer. He just shows up, wants to talk about a bunch of irrelevant stories and about how AI is terrible.
Yeah, you should just do that show solo.
Well, we did it this week without him. We had Jamil instead.
Oh, we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. We miss him terribly.
Indeed. Hopefully he's having fun in the desert, which is actually why we're doing this now, because I figured I could get this recorded and out. I was going to have 2, maybe 3 out, and I was ambitious, but that was when I thought I could start Monday of last week. But
oh, so you're doing individual interviews with several different people?
It's kind of up in the air. If you want to come back for the other 2, I'm trying to find guests. So the format for this is going to be one for Marcus Verus, one for Andreas, and one for Joa, and then probably one with Eneasz. But
he gets to be on it?
Do what?
I said, he gets to be on it?
I mean, I like to wrap up these book podcasts with a talk with the author if I get the opportunity to. The fact that I have ready access to him, just makes it all the easier. So what I want to talk about was What Lies Dreaming, if that isn't clear yet. So I don't...
Is this episode 1?
This is episode 1.
All
so
right. What are we calling this podcast?
It's up in the air. I'm probably going to call it Who Lies Dreaming, Marcus Verus, Andreas, Joa, whatever. Or We Want Dreams. Something that riffs on terribly off of We Want More, We've Got Worm, that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But basically, I wanted to start by saying that I think I mentioned this with the Work the Candle one, is that I have a hard time picking up a new TV show, especially new books.
Mm-hmm.
A movie is a one and done, so I'm not so averse to grabbing a new one of those, but I tend to rather watch repeats rather than start new shows or even read new books. So that's why it took me years to get around to reading this. And I remembered I read the short story that this was the evolution of years ago when that came out. Some of this felt familiar, but only distantly so.
Yeah, I have trouble picking up new books too. It always takes me a few chapters to actually get a feeling for the world. And until then, I don't remember anything that's happened.
And that whole beginning process usually just feels like a slog.
Yeah.
Wait, sometimes
what?
it lasts
What?
for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This book was easier for me to pick up because I actually read it as part of when the server was doing book club.
Yeah.
If you remember that, that was years ago.
Yeah, I wasn't as... there was a period... I'm getting back into it now, but there was a period where I really didn't touch Discord for a while because it sucked for a bit. You guys didn't. Debate and Conspiracy Discord's always been perfect, but my experience started to take a bit of a drag.
Well, yeah, you should just not be on any other servers.
Yeah, that's the lesson I took, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go.
There's a local rationalist server, and that's about it. But basically, there were a few sentences, and that's why I want to start with Marcus Verus, and you were available, so it just kind of worked out great. But it was reading his perspective that was I need to talk about this book.
All right, what about it?
So, I'm not going to do any huge refreshers on the plot or anything like that, but I guess I'll do the broad strokes. But we're not going to do a play by play. This is going to be a different format. But
good. I think because I did not take notes.
Good. I think he did a great job capturing the kind of the worn, weathered perspective of I just pictured the old Roman guy in robes, basically from the TV show Spartacus, who's just been working towards this important esteemed goal to himself for decades, right? Mm. You get the exhaustion, you get the worn out bit of him. The character just came off the page, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how Eneasz captured the voice so well, someone who's lost a loved one and made every effort to carry them forward. But there was two lines I went and grabbed in preparation for this. And the first one was, this is referenced all the time through his POV, where his son Quintus died in the war effort to keep the barbarians at bay or whatever, right?
The wrong kid died.
That's right. And but as he says, his son wasn't fully dead, not yet. As long as Marcus kept him alive in his thoughts, Quintus retained the ability to impact this world. Marcus had made himself Quintus's bridge between this realm and the next. He would keep his son's soul safe. And then there's like a scene. So then he goes. I don't think it starts this way. I think it's more as the week goes on. The book takes the whole book takes takes place over the course of a week. And after a while, he starts like imagining like a physical apparition of his son. And I think his wife comes in and was like, "You've been ignoring your whole family and stuff." And he looks over to his figment of his son, and he says, "You have a duty to mother," Quintus said. Not what Marcus wanted to hear, but Marcus knew what Quintus would say. If he altered Quintus's words to fit his own convenience, it would be as bad as killing Quintus himself. He must hold fast to Quintus's true reactions. He was his son's only keeper.
Oh my God.
And it was that line that if he altered his words to fit his own convenience, to be as bad as killing him himself, that's what made me realize, like, oh, I need to talk about this book to somebody.
That's the most Eneasz line I've ever heard.
Oh, there's a handful of like the most Eneasz lines ever. I love it.
Right when you said that, I was like, oh man, I should bring this up to Eneasz. And I was like, oh wait, he wrote that.
Why do you say?
Oh, because that's his whole thing is he's one of these believers in that a perfect copy of you is you, and if you alter yourself in some way, then you're basically dead and it's a different person.
I talked about that all the time. Yeah, he does, and I hadn't put that connection together actually explicitly. It was more just the idea of I was thinking it, I guess, specifically just from Marcus Verus's point of view, like how he would feel that way without any idea of being uploaded into the Matrix.
No. This is all Eneasz's feelings on immortality.
I liked. I happened to know independently about how much Eneasz hates dreams, and so
does he? I didn't know.
Oh that. Yeah. I think in one of the Joa sections, he has like this whole nightmare about like going to go visit his prostitute boyfriend character guy.
Yeah, and
then the guy's like, "Oh shit, you're waking up! I'm gonna die! Please don't wake up!" I remember Eneasz telling me a story that he had a dream like that once. Although I think it was his brother. That was like, "You're killing me! Please don't wake up!" And
that sounds familiar. I've definitely heard somebody talk about that before.
I've had dreams where like I know I'm dreaming, but usually I don't feel the least bit guilty about waking up over it. Anyway, it was just fun to see like the bits.
There are definitely dreams I don't want to wake up for, but they usually don't involve family members.
That's true. They usually involve hookers and blow. But
make my own dreams.
Yeah, with blackjack and hookers. I don't know, man. I just I wanted to get this off, and like I said, it was going to be a bit more regimented. Those are my only two notes, were those two things I pulled out. But like the character of Marcus Verus, the other thing about the book as a whole is, he captures it from three wildly different perspectives, right? Yeah. And Verus is at like the top of the ladder, whereas Joe is at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And arguably, I guess they each have their own struggles and sufferings, but like Joa isn't as put out with his station as you imagine he would be, right?
Yeah, I mean,
most of the stuff that sucks about his life is from other people.
Yeah, and he's just mostly trying to survive.
Yeah, and Marcus, I wish I had more written down here, but this is we're coming up on a time crunch. But I don't know. I loved I wonder, and when I get a chance to pick Eneasz's brain about this, I'll ask him. I wonder, like, so he had the three characters. He also did the three perspectives. What do you call the first, second, third persons?
Yeah, perspectives.
Perspectives, yeah. And I'd never read a second person story before. Yeah, I remember Googling years and years ago why it was first and third, like what even was second. Mm-hmm. And second was like, oh yeah, you do this, you do that. Yeah. And I think I totally get why he did the second perspective for Andreas.
What is your thought on that?
Well, I'll talk about it more in the Andreas chapter, but the episode. But maybe this will just turn it. Maybe I'll just do three that kind of hodgepodge together. But really, I think Andreas, I say you on subconsciously actually because it's written second person, but it conveys his struggles on a more personal level. Like you're the one not feeding the citizens if you don't steal the bread or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's more visceral that way than saying, well, Marcus felt bad. So it's interesting. And I wonder if he put Marcus as third perspective because he wanted to just do all three and this was the character that worked for, or if there was any other reason. Maybe it was one he felt most distant to, or the one that we're not meant to insert ourselves into that much.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Verus is, he's the emperor. So
basically, he's the second hand to the emperor, kind of.
Right.
Like, yeah, the emperor is his loser friend.
Right.
Well, his friend who was beleaguered. Yeah, he's the noble.
He's the de facto emperor.
Yeah, he's pulling the strings.
Yeah. But he's definitely the one who is the most difficult to not to empathize with, but to identify with.
Yeah. I agree. I mean,
that makes sense to me. Why, if one of the characters was going to be third person, it would be him. That
makes sense. He's not going to have a lot of noble readers, and what made leaning into Andreas for a second. My one sentence takeaway from him is that he's basically been bitten by the Peter Singer bug, and he has Peter Singer thundering in his head all the time, right?
Yeah.
You must atone for this. You'll never be able to, but you need to keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Why are you eating? You've got enough to eat. Those kids are starving. Now you've fed those kids. What about those ones? Like,
God, that would be absolute hell to have Peter Singer in your head.
Yeah, I think I get why Marcus why Andreas drinks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Marcus, I'm trying to think of like if he has like all the stuff that we'd talk about in a book analysis podcast, like an arc or something, and not really actually. Like he has his ambition, and I guess if he has an arc, it's more of a spiral downwards to where he's willing to throw not just all of his, not everything he has, but everything in Rome into the ditch just to get to the. He's worried about the oncoming blight of the hedonists who are going to let Rome fester and become complacent while the barbarians come kick the doors in 20 years later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the last part of the book, he makes the decision to burn all the hoards of food that he'd been saving during a famine.
Yeah.
Just as a sacrifice to burn 10 times that much food that's on its way.
Right. Like he, so the way I read that is that he's, he has this sort of pragmatic plan, right, to save Rome. That is by seizing power and engineering this famine. But at the end, I feel like it's not that he really changes, but that he is revealed as, not being a pragmatist. That this was never about, the saving Rome or, the earthly, materialistic things that, he was telling himself it was about. It was about his own power and his own legacy, and stopping the bad guys, preventing his enemies from winning.
I agree with the second part. I'm not sure so much about the legacy part. I got the impression that he didn't care if he got credit. Like maybe I guess he kind of did.
I don't mean his reputation as a legacy, but I mean his impact on the world.
Okay, yeah,
not necessarily that anyone has to know that.
He did like the opportunities that he got to puff his chest in front of his political enemies, though.
He did like that, but who doesn't like that?
Yeah, right. His ambition to. I mean, so you think that it was less about saving Rome at all costs and more about like him wanting to have a big impact?
Yeah, well, because then why at the end would he have, decided to just burn all the food stores?
I think this might be part of my problem with just being like, I don't know, hugely gullible all the time. Like I'll take everyone's word for it. But the way that he describes it and the way that I bought it was like, sure, this would get us through the famine, but that will just make us more complacent. We need I need to knock down this emperor. I need to knock down my political opponent, whose name I can't remember. And if that means that a few more people, a few thousand more people have to starve, then that's the price I'm willing to pay, right? It's interesting, it not interesting so much as it is.
Die, but
I'm willing to throw. I have waves and waves of men at your disposal. Yeah, if he has to throw, if the killbots have a maximum kill amount of 1,000, then he has to throw all the people at the killbots to stop them.
Right, but then, when you encounter him at the beginning of the story, that's not something you would expect him to say. He has this very pragmatic plan where there's going to be some pain, but it's not going to be mass starvation. He has all the grain stored up, and after he seizes power and crushes the hedonists, then everything will be fine.
Right.
And when that plan doesn't work out, instead of doing the pragmatic thing and being like, oh man, I guess that won't work. Time to come up with a new plan. He's like, nope, we're doing it anyway. And it'll be, 100 times the amount of pain and suffering and death that I thought it was going to be. But this is all that matters.
That's a good point. It's not clear. You're right. He does just double down, which isn't all that uncommon for a sunk cost. But I wonder at what point he would have stopped. Like, how many Romans are actually going to die? If it kills half of Rome, if it kills 90%, is it still worth it to him? Right.
Right.
It's not really clear that
would he rather destroy Rome than see it fall into the hands of his enemies?
That strikes me as distinctly plausible. There was a line, or there was a plot line that I think didn't really carry all the way to the end, but he had this he had this Hail Mary idea to talk to the wizard barbarian guy and say, look, I've got this really vivid figment of my son and all these papers. Is there a way to resurrect him?
Yeah.
And he has Andreas just sit there and read because he's also got the eye of the gods on him. And
right. And he thinks that having Andreas form this super salient connection to Quintus is how it works.
Now that I think about your interpretation of what it means to how a lot of his obsessing about Quintus and keeping him perfectly true in his mind is about Eneasz's view of self, of self in general. In a way, just having someone else have that figment is another way of keeping Quintus alive, right? Yeah. So it wouldn't even necessarily have to be about the gods breaking Andreas's brain and shoving Quintus's in there, right?
Right.
It's no, now we've just got another copy.
Mm-hmm.
Which, in a way, if we're going to go ahead and psychoanalyze Eneasz from here, is kind of why Eneasz writes in the first place.
That's what I'm here for.
I think that that there's a lot to be said about wanting to put so many things out in more people's consciences than your own.
Yeah.
Whether it be through writing or podcasting or whatever, because then some semblance of you goes on, right?
It's what they call a legacy.
I suppose so.
So I just thought of this, and it's been years since I actually read this book, so I probably remembering some stuff wrong. But when we were talking about, Marcus, would he rather destroy Rome than see it fall into the hands of his enemies? How could that? Maybe that's related also to the idea that if he changes anything about Quintus, then Quintus is dead. Right? So maybe he's looking at Rome the same way, that actually what would happen if his enemies gained power is that Rome would be destroyed. It wouldn't be Rome anymore. In the same way,
it might exist only in name,
Quintus, if he changed, anything about him to suit his own convenience.
Yeah, if he modified Quintus to say, "No, man, you got this. Don't worry about it," then he's like, "Well, that's not what he would say, right?"
And
if Rome were to persist in such a twisted form, it's as bad as killing Rome himself, right?
Right. So why there's no risking destroying Rome is par for the course there, because if he doesn't do it, Rome's going to be destroyed. And maybe he's telling himself that, that'll be in 20 years when the barbarians attack. But maybe how he really feels is that if Rome is altered in this way, it loses all the value that it had as Rome itself.
Right. It becomes this weakened shell of itself that, he'd rather he'd rather burn it to the ground than let it turn into that.
Like Eneasz thinks happens when you wirehead.
Yeah, and those filthy hedonists are all about the wireheading. This is Eneasz's hard stance against wireheading.
I think really is.
I wonder if Eneasz would rather burn the world. Well, actually, no. I think he would rather the world wirehead than actually. Okay, what I was going to say is I wonder if he'd rather destroy the world than wirehead it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was going to say, no, I think he'd rather wirehead it. But I think what he'd actually say is there'd be no difference.
I think that's what he'd say. And then, so I'm thinking maybe that's what Marcus Verus would say. If he's saying, would you rather destroy Rome or see it fall to the hedonists? He'd be like, that's the same. These are the same picture, Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something there.
So Eneasz, if you don't want to be Marcus Verus in the story, because I don't think he's the hero, maybe consider modifying your stance on wireheading.
That's actually a good question. I don't know who the hero is. I mean, Joe is probably like the best bet, but Andreas definitely tries his best.
Yeah, I think Joe and Andreas, they're not opposed to each other, and they're also pretty sympathetic characters.
That's true. But if trying your best makes you the hero, then Marcus Verus is up there too, right?
No.
Dr. Doom tries his best, but he's also the bad guy, right? So.
Marcus Verus, he's a sympathetic villain, but he does seem to be the villain.
Yeah, he's not the Titus, who's a character who goes across all three of these characters' paths, right?
Right.
And I love how he's a different person to all of them. To Marcus, he's the, perfectly respectable. Oh, your son and I we're super chummy, and don't I remind you of him kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually I don't know. Since I'm not planning on doing a Titus episode, we can psychoanalyze Titus here too. I don't know who Titus. I was gonna say I wonder which one he really is, but I don't think I don't think that question actually has meaning to it. Like, which one are they really? They're really all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's really
we contain multitudes.
Exactly. They contain multitudes, man.
I mean, not me, but other people.
Right. I've looked inside. There's no one home in here, but other people. But he is who he is to Verus, but he's also like the savage orangutan crucifying rapist that he is to Joa too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's he's less of a sympathetic villain as more as
I do not remember an orangutan being crucified, but like I said, it's been a few years since I read this book.
It was just one, like they only talked about it I think once, but like Joa spends the whole week running away from the Ludus every time he hears Titus is in the neighborhood, and he comes back one day, and in his little office where he does his accounting, his orangutan is crucified to the wall in there. So,
that is a weird thing to do.
Yeah, that guy's pretty fucked up. I also loved how unceremonious his death was.
Man,
which
I'm glad fitting. I don't have any multitudes. I don't need that in my life.
Right? Who's got the room for that? Yeah, Titus just dies when he's raping Joa, and Joa grabs the accounting pen and turns around and hits him in the neck with it. And it wasn't like some awesome showdown. It wasn't I set a cool trap for him. It was just just this blind reach, and it shows how fragile even like the biggest baddest guy is, right?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of anything else to say on Marcus Verus. I really did love the. Do you remember the ending? Where it's all the POVs mingling.
Yeah, I actually reread that chapter.
Just that whole thing sent shivers down my spine. Mm-hmm. I fucking loved that.
That was fun to record too, because we all did. We all split it up into different lines we were reading.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I tried. So if this was released as a proper podcast feed, I would have listened to it. But I tried listening to one on a walk, and the web page player just hated running in the background of my phone in my pocket. Oh yeah,
web page players are garbage.
It stopped twice.
Release it as a podcast.
Right. Yeah, it didn't save my progress either time when it stopped, and I'm like, well, I forget it. I don't know if I was 5 minutes into this or 10. I'm not.
You don't want that. No, I think what we did was we when we were recording it, we just uploaded everything into like a Google folder, and people.
Yeah, I think that they were then just attached to the web pages on the website.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'll have some more refined thoughts for the follow-up episodes here, but I can't think of anything else right off I wanted to say about Marcus Verus, other than I absolutely loved the. I was going to say the connection, the whatever, the relationship to Quintus.
Yeah.
I thought that hit right on the head really well.
Yeah, that was. I thought like that was very believable. That was. But also, that probably also had something to do with why he was so monomaniacally focused to the point where he would, risk the wholesale starvation of Rome.
Yeah, it seems like he and his family probably wouldn't have starved, but
yeah,
it definitely would put them at risk. You can only get so many starving people before they start kicking your door in, looking where your food is.
Yeah.
I anticipate something like that could happen in our not too distant future, and the rich people with hordes of food aren't going to be able to hold on to it while us starving barbarians are scratching at the gate, right?
Yeah, and like I said, it's been a while since I read this, but my recollection was that like his plan by the end didn't even seem like it would work.
His plan at the end was basically keep things destabilized for like the rest of the week at least until he could. I'm trying to remember the specific. What was actually the end game at the end? Like he didn't want he wanted things to stay destabilized long enough for him to overthrow the emperor. Is what it was. And overthrow him like somewhat legitimately, like get the Senate behind him and say, yeah, this guy sucks. He caused all this problems. Let's throw him out.
But it didn't seem like by the end that was likely to happen.
Yeah, so it definitely he was reaching for straws at that point, right?
That's how it seemed to me. Is he was just like, no, it's still good. It's still good.
Just a little airborne.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because he just couldn't give up on it.
Yeah, in for a penny, in for a pound, I guess, right? Yeah, I like.
Oh no, we're doing this, no matter what goes wrong.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much else to wrap up on this. This was going to be a better job. Maybe Eneasz does bring all the polish, and I didn't have any of that. But why don't we? Unless you had much more to say on it, we can wrap here before it gets too much further off the rails.
No, I'm good.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for joining me.
All right, awesome.
Cool. Thanks again, bud.